Fermentation might sound like a fancy term that belongs in a science lab, but it's really just a fun way to preserve vegetables and boost their flavor. Picture this. You're in a cozy Amish kitchen surrounded by the smell of fresh veggies. There's a big bowl of cabbage waiting to become sauerkraut, and the excitement is palpable. I remember my first attempt at fermentation. I thought I was going to create a gourmet masterpiece, but it ended up more like a science fair project gone wrong. However, the magic of fermentation is that when done right, it not only preserves food, but also transforms it into something delicious and nutritious. So, what exactly happens during fermentation? It's a fascinating process involving good bacteria, especially lactic acid bacteria, which feast on the sugars in vegetables. As they munch away, they produce lactic acid, which gives fermented foods their signature tang. It's like throwing a party in a jar where the bacteria are the life of the event. And get this, while they're partying, they're also creating probiotics, which are like little superheroes for your gut, helping you digest food and keeping your immune system strong. Just think of them as tiny cheerleaders for your stomach, waving their pom-poms every time you munch on a crunchy pickle. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Did you know that some of the oldest records of fermentation date back thousands of years? Ancient civilizations in China, Egypt, and Mesopotamia were already on the fermentation bandwagon. They knew that this simple method could turn plain veggies into flavorful treats that last longer than fresh produce. It's a bit like magic, really. Turning something ordinary into something extraordinary without a spell book, just a little salt and patience. Fermentation isn't just about throwing some veggies in a jar and hoping for the best. It's a waiting game. The Amish have mastered the art of patience, knowing exactly when their vegetables reach peak fermentation. Sometimes it's like waiting for your favorite TV show to drop a new season. It feels like forever. But when you finally get to taste that tangy goodness, it's worth every moment spent waiting. In my experience, the key is to check on them regularly, but not so often that you start talking to your veggies like they're old friends. When it comes to fermentation, not all vegetables are created equal, and the Amish have a knack for picking just the right ones. Think about it. Have you ever tried to ferment something like lettuce? Let's just say that wilting greens don't exactly scream tangy delight. The Amish usually go for sturdy, flavorful veggies that can stand the test of time, like cabbage, carrots, and cucumbers. Each of these choices has its own charm, and they bring different flavors and textures to the table. Cabbage, for instance, becomes sauerkraut, a tangy, crunchy delight that's perfect for topping on a bratwurst or sneaking into a casserole. And who could resist pickled carrots that add a pop of color and a burst of flavor to salads or sandwiches? The freshness of the vegetables is key. Amish gardens are often bursting with homegrown goodness, and you can taste the difference. They know the secret is to harvest their vegetables at peak ripeness. I once tried to ferment some sad-looking veggies from the back of my fridge, thinking I was a fermentation wizard. Spoiler alert, they turned into a science experiment that even I didn't want to taste. So if you're going to dive into fermentation, make sure to get the freshest produce you can find. It's like choosing the best ingredients for your favorite recipe. It makes all the difference. There's also something quite satisfying about handpicking your vegetables from a garden. It's a little connection to the earth, and it gives you a deeper appreciation for what you're about to create. Picture the sun shining on ripe cucumbers, the earthy aroma of fresh carrots pulled right from the soil. It's almost like a mini adventure, and it sets the stage for a delicious fermentation journey. You might even find yourself feeling a little like a farmer, taking pride in your veggie selection. I mean, who doesn't love a little garden glamour in their life? And speaking of cucumbers, you might wonder why the tomato turned red. Well, it saw the salad dressing. Okay, that's an old one, but it never fails to get a chuckle. But seriously, cucumbers are the stars of pickling and are often fermented into crunchy pickles that pair perfectly with sandwiches or stand alone as a delightful snack. It's amazing how something so simple can become so versatile through fermentation. Salting is where the magic truly begins in the fermentation process. It's not just about sprinkling a little salt here and there. It's a critical step that ensures those crunchy veggies turn into something scrumptious. You might say that salt is like the bouncer at a club. Only the right bacteria get to party. The Amish use salt not just to enhance the flavor, but to create an environment that promotes beneficial bacteria, keeping the bad guys away. Who knew seasoning could be so powerful? When you add salt to your vegetables, it works to draw out moisture. This is important because that moisture, combined with the salt, creates a brine that helps preserve the veggies. As the salt pulls the water out, it reduces the pH level of the mixture. Did you know that when salt lowers the pH, it can make your fermented veggies safer and tastier? That's right. It's like giving your veggies a protective shield, ready to fend off any unwanted guests. You could almost imagine the vegetables donning tiny capes, flying around your pantry with a mission to stay fresh and fabulous. Now, the process isn't just a sprinkle and go. The Amish often aim for a specific salt ratio, usually around 2 to 3% of the total weight of the vegetables. So, if you're feeling fancy and decide to weigh your veggies, which I highly recommend for a more precise outcome, that means if you have a pound of cabbage, you'd use about 1 to 2 teaspoons of salt. It might not sound like much, but it packs a punch. The magic really happens as the salted veggies begin to ferment. They start to soften and transform, releasing their natural sugars. You can almost feel the anticipation building. It's like watching a caterpillar turn into a butterfly, only this one ends up in a jar instead of a garden. As time goes by, the veggies will take on that unmistakable tangy flavor that we all love. Speaking of flavor, I learned this lesson the hard way during my first attempt at fermentation. I thought, why not just add a bit more salt for flavor? Let's just say my batch tasted more like a salt lick than anything appetizing. My friends still tease me about the salted disaster that ruined a perfectly good batch of cucumbers. Who knew that too much of a good thing could backfire? The fermentation crock. This is where your salted veggies go to hang out and transform into something truly delicious. The Amish have been using these traditional vessels for generations, and let me tell you, they've got it down to a science, or should I say, a science of taste. These crocks are often made of clay and designed with a unique water-sealed lid. This setup is genius. The water-filled moat around the lid creates a barrier that prevents air from getting in while allowing the gases produced during fermentation to escape. It's like giving your veggies a cozy little spa retreat where they can relax and bubble away without any unwanted guests crashing the party. Just picture your veggies lounging by a pool, sipping on their own brine. I remember my first attempt at fermenting vegetables. I thought I could get creative and use an old glass jar instead of a traditional crock. Let's just say that jar had other plans. One morning, I woke up to a kitchen that smelled like a pickle factory exploded. It was a bit like a science experiment gone wrong, with veggies spilling over everywhere. I quickly realized that I was not just aiming for tangy goodness, but trying to prevent a complete kitchen disaster. After that, I made it a point to invest in a good fermentation crock, one that promised not to throw a temper tantrum in the middle of the night. When choosing a crock, size matters. The Amish often pick crocks that can hold several quarts of vegetables, perfect for their family gatherings. That way, they can whip up large batches that will keep them stocked through the cold months. Plus, it's a fantastic way to use up that garden bounty. A big crock means a lot of delicious ferment, which, in turn, means more happy family meals. Now, if you don't have a fancy fermentation crock lying around, don't sweat it. You can still ferment using jars. Just make sure they're wide-mouthed and can handle the pressure of the gases. Some folks even get creative and use food-safe plastic buckets. Just be careful. You don't want a surprise pop when you're not ready for it. As your veggies soak in their salty brine inside the crock, they'll begin to ferment. You'll notice bubbling and fizzing. This is the good stuff. Those bubbles are signs that the beneficial bacteria are hard at work, munching away at the sugars and producing delicious acids. You can almost hear them cheering each other on. Let's make these veggies fabulous. So, as you set your fermentation crock to work, remember to keep it in a cool, dark spot, away from direct sunlight. This will help ensure a steady fermentation process. The Amish know that patience is key, but who doesn't love the anticipation of a new culinary adventure? When fermenting, the Amish know that keeping the vegetables submerged under the brine is crucial. You don't want any veggies doing the salsa dance on top, exposed to air and all the nasty mold it can bring. The secret? Weights. The Amish use various objects to weigh down their vegetables, from clean stones to specially designed glass weights. You can bet they've got a treasure trove of just right stones in their yards, all carefully picked for their fermentation adventures. I once attempted to be resourceful and thought I could use an old brick from my garden. That brick was a total diva. It floated like it was on a lazy river, ignoring all my attempts to keep it down. Meanwhile, my sauerkraut was probably wondering why it was stuck on a floating vacation. Imagine rummaging through the yard for the perfect weight. I found one rock that looked perfect, until I realized it was home to a family of ants. I can only imagine them saying, "Hey, where are you going with our condo? It's all fun and games until you've got a little ant parade in your fermentation jar." The key here is finding something that's clean, safe, and hefty enough to keep your veggies submerged. When the vegetables are fully submerged, they're free to ferment without the worry of mold taking over the party. The Amish are masters at this, often using rocks or weights that fit perfectly in the crocks, allowing the brine to fully cover their veggies. It's like giving the vegetables their own cozy blanket of salty goodness. And let's not forget the math behind this. When you add the right weight, you ensure the brine keeps those veggies down and allows them to soak in the flavors. This method also helps create a perfect anaerobic environment, which is fancy talk for without oxygen. In this environment, those beneficial bacteria can do their thing and make your veggies tangy and scrumptious. So as you gear up to submerge your vegetables, just remember, whether you're using a hefty rock or a fancy glass weight, keep those veggies underwater. Your taste buds will thank you later when they get a bite of that perfectly fermented goodness. Once your veggies are all submerged and weighted down, the real test of patience begins, waiting for the fermentation magic to happen. This is where the Amish truly shine, knowing just how long their veggies need to ferment to reach that perfect tangy flavor. It's like waiting for that deliciously baked pie to cool before diving in. Hard, but worth it. The timeline for fermentation can vary widely based on the temperature, type of vegetable, and personal taste. For instance, sauerkraut can take anywhere from 1 week to a month to reach its peak flavor. You'll want to be vigilant during this period, checking on your veggies and using your sense of smell as your guide. It's all about balance. Too little time and you might end up with crunchy, bland bites. Too much time and you could have a surprise batch of sour surprises that could make even the bravest taste buds shudder. I recall a time I got a bit too excited and thought I could speed up the process by placing my fermentation jar in a sunny spot on my windowsill. Little did I know that was the recipe for disaster. I walked in a week later to a jar that looked more like a science experiment gone wrong than a culinary delight. The smell? Let's just say it was a potent reminder to respect the fermentation time. It's a journey, not a race, folks. The Amish have a knack for judging when their creations are ready. They'll often taste a sample to gauge the flavor, relying on their seasoned intuition. It's like knowing when to take cookies out of the oven. Nobody wants burnt offerings unless you're trying to impress the neighbors with your charred culinary skills. The right balance of sourness will have you eagerly anticipating the crunch of those perfectly fermented veggies in your next meal. During this wait, you might also want to keep an eye out for any unwanted visitors. Yes, I'm talking about mold. If you see any pesky fuzz on top, don't panic. Just scoop it off and your ferment is still good to go. The key is to ensure the veggies remain submerged. Otherwise, they'll throw a moldy party right on top. It's like having a friend who brings their own snacks to the potluck, uninvited and not so welcome. Once you've hit the sweet spot and your fermented veggies are ready, you'll be pleasantly surprised at how rewarding this process is. The bright, tangy flavors will dance on your taste buds, making it all worthwhile. Plus, this patience pays off when you realize you've created something wholesome and nourishing that can be enjoyed all year long. Now that you've mastered the art of fermentation and have jars filled with delightful, tangy treasures, it's time to talk about how the Amish store these goodies to ensure they stay fresh and delicious throughout the winter. Picture this. You've just spent hours creating your perfect batch of sauerkraut, and now you want it to last longer than a carton of milk left out on a hot summer day. Proper storage is key. The Amish have a simple yet effective method for storing their fermented vegetables. They often place them in cool, dark places, like root cellars or basements, which are ideal for maintaining a steady temperature. This is akin to finding the best spot in your house for hiding snacks from the kids. Out of sight and out of mind. Keeping your fermented creations away from light and heat not only preserves their vibrant colors, but also extends their shelf life, allowing you to enjoy those flavors long after the garden has gone dormant. It's interesting to note that properly stored fermented vegetables can last up to a year or more. That's right, 1 year of crunchiness and zing ready to spice up any meal making it a fantastic way to ensure you have nutritious options even in the coldest months. This technique is like pulling out your favorite sweater just when you need it most. Comforting and familiar, even if it hasn't seen the light of day in a while. During my own attempts at fermenting, I learned the hard way that not all storage methods are created equal. I once thought it would be a great idea to store my fermented carrots in a sunny kitchen cabinet. Let's just say that after a week, I opened that cabinet to find a pungent aroma that suggested my fresh veggies had taken a turn for the worst. The lesson? Avoid the sun like it's your ex showing up unannounced at a family gathering. Once you've found the perfect storage spot, don't forget about your jars. It's best to keep them tightly sealed to maintain that delicious tangy goodness and prevent any unwelcome guests from crashing the party. Think of it as giving your veggies a snug little blanket, cozy, warm, and protected from the outside world. And let's not overlook the importance of labeling. I once mixed up my jars and accidentally put pickled beets in my chili instead of my beloved fermented carrots. The results were memorable, but not in a good way. Labeling helps you keep track of your fermented bounty, ensuring you're always in the know about what's waiting for you in the pantry. Now that your fermented vegetables are safely stored away, let's explore how to make them the star of your meals. The Amish have a knack for weaving these tangy treats into everyday dishes, turning something simple into something truly delightful. Think of your fermented veggies as the secret ingredient that can take a meal from ordinary to extraordinary. Much like finding a hidden stash of chocolate when you thought your candy supply was running low. One classic way to incorporate sauerkraut is to toss it onto a hot dog or bratwurst. Trust me, there's something magical about that crunchy, sour bite against the juicy sausage. You can almost hear the flavor harmony singing a tune of, "This is what summer cookouts were made for." And if you're feeling adventurous, try adding a spoonful of sauerkraut to your grilled cheese sandwich. That extra tanginess is like a surprise party for your taste buds, but it doesn't stop at meat. Fermented veggies can liven up salads in ways you wouldn't believe. A handful of pickles or a dollop of kimchi can transform a mundane salad into a zesty masterpiece. I once whipped up a salad for a gathering, excitedly added my homemade pickled carrots, and claimed it was gourmet. Let's just say the next day, my friends reminded me of the great carrot incident when a bit too much of the pickling brine made its way into the bowl. It became an inside joke, but hey, at least we had a good laugh. Fermented vegetables can also shine in stir-fries. Imagine sautéing some fresh veggies in a pan and then tossing in a few spoonfuls of kimchi right at the end. It adds a kick that will make your meal sing. I had a friend who tried this and ended up accidentally adding a whole jar of kimchi to the pan. The result? A culinary adventure. She called it Korean-style stir-fry gone rogue, and while it was a little spicy, it was still delicious enough that we didn't want to stop eating. Don't forget about breakfast either. Adding sauerkraut to scrambled eggs or an omelet can give your morning meal a delightful zing. It's not every day you can say your breakfast is both nutritious and packed with flavor. I remember one particularly ambitious Sunday morning when I decided to mix leftover fermented cabbage into my eggs. Let's just say it was a hit, despite my daughter's initial skepticism. Now, she even asks for sauerkraut eggs when we're having brunch. Fermentation is having quite the moment in today's culinary world. Move over traditional methods, trendy foods like kimchi, kombucha, and even fermented hot sauce are stealing the spotlight. You can practically hear the buzz about these foods in grocery aisles as people rave about their gut health benefits and unique flavors. But let's take a step back and appreciate the Amish approach, which is all about simplicity and tradition. While everyone is out there experimenting with their quirky flavor combinations, the Amish are quietly perfecting age-old recipes that have stood the test of time. It's like comparing a classic novel to the latest bestseller. One is full of deep wisdom, while the other might just fade away next season. Now, don't get me wrong, there's something exciting about modern fermentation trends. I mean, who doesn't love a spicy kimchi that kicks your taste buds into gear? But have you ever taken a moment to check the price tag on those fancy jars at the store? Let's just say you might need a small loan if you're planning to stock up. Meanwhile, the Amish keep their fermentation practices straightforward and cost-effective, relying on their gardens and the age-old wisdom passed down through generations. In their world, it's not about the trendiest ingredient. It's about preserving what's in season and creating something delicious that lasts. I had a run-in with modern fermentation at a local market once. I was tempted by a jar of artisan pickles that boasted a secret chef's blend of spices. The vendor was going on about how these pickles were crafted with love and aged to perfection. Intrigued, I decided to splurge a little. When I finally took a bite, I realized I could barely taste the cucumber. It was like a flavor explosion, but not in a good way. I couldn't help but think that the Amish would chuckle at my experience. They'd just throw some cucumbers, salt, and maybe a few spices into a crock, and voila, deliciousness without the theatrics. The beauty of the Amish approach lies in its authenticity. Fermentation isn't just a trend for them, it's a way of life. They focus on what they have, utilizing their homegrown produce to make flavorful, nutrient-rich foods that sustain them through the harsh winter months. They're not out to impress anyone with fancy labels or gourmet presentations. They just want to enjoy what nature provides. As we look at the rise of fermentation in modern cuisine, it's essential to remember that while trends come and go, the principles of traditional methods hold true. The Amish show us that fermentation can be both a science and an art, without the need for frills or fuss. It's a reminder that sometimes the best things in life are simple and rooted in our history. If you've ever thought about diving into the world of fermentation, now is the perfect time. Embracing this ancient practice not only connects us to our food in a meaningful way, but also adds an exciting twist to our meals. The Amish have mastered the art of fermenting vegetables, and you can too. Picture yourself in the kitchen, surrounded by fresh veggies and a sprinkle of salt, ready to create something special. The best part? You don't need to be a culinary wizard to get started, just a willingness to try and maybe a dash of patience, because, let's face it, good things take time. Think about how satisfying it would be to pop open a jar of your homemade sauerkraut in the middle of winter, knowing you created that zesty goodness from scratch. It's like having a garden party in a jar, minus the sunburn. And while your fermentation journey might have its hiccups, like that one time I mistook a carrot for a cucumber and ended up with an odd-tasting mix, you'll be learning and laughing along the way. Fermentation is all about experimenting, and if you happen to misjudge a recipe, consider it a delicious lesson learned. And let's not forget the health benefits. Fermented foods are known for their probiotics, which are the good bacteria that keep our guts happy. Research shows that these little warriors can help with digestion and boost our immune systems. So each time you take a bite of your homemade pickles or sauerkraut, you're not just enjoying a tasty treat, you're also fueling your body with goodness. It's like giving your insides a hug. So grab those vegetables, put on your favorite apron, and get ready to transform your kitchen into a fermentation haven. Whether you're preparing for winter or simply trying to add a bit of excitement to your meals, the art of fermentation is calling. You might just find that the laughter, community, and tradition that come with it are the best ingredients of all. Let's get fermenting.